Hi, everybody. This is the
Hi.
Debate the Hate live debate for 2026. This is Luis Perdices. I'm one of the mods here, and I'll be moderating the debate, which will be fairly minimal. Jeremy is going to be manning technical stuff behind the scenes. And thank you, Jeremy, for putting all this together. And we have our participants. Hopefully, you can see their names, but we have Flora, Joden, Melody, and Paula. And we'll be having an exchange on several topics. The first, well, at least two topics, maybe three, maybe four. We'll see how it goes. Sanctuary cities, then, which and then about halfway through, we'll go to trans issues. And I think this group has a lot to say on many things. So I don't anticipate we'll have a lot of extra time. But if we do, we'll also talk about universal health care. I'm sorry, universal healthcare, and I miswrote the topics, but I'll get the other one before we get there. So let's start out talking about sanctuary cities. And anyone like to start? All right, Flora, since you're the closest to my picture on the screen, what do you have to say about sanctuary cities?
So I will say I am in support for the continuation of sanctuary cities. I think at its core, for what it is currently and legally, it is just a separation of what our federal officers do compared to our local police. Having those protections in place ensures that proper crime reporting happens, that people feel safe reporting crimes happening to themselves or that they witness. There's also economic benefits. There's more likely to be tax reporting, more money inflow to the IRS. And all in all, if I had to sum up where I feel like in one sentence, my stance is that the greatest police resource is trust.
Great. Um, Anybody want to speak in support of that? And then we'll go to positions that might be against it.
Well, I support sanctuary cities in the concept of the legal framework that they're established within, but I have a little slightly different take on it that is probably more applicable to a separation of powers. So for me, sanctuary cities is a term of art that's made to describe something we made up. It's a made up thing. What we really have are a set of laws and regulations that delineate between what the federal government and federal government policing operations are within the states, adhering to the 10th Amendment, and hopefully the 4th, 5th, and 6th while we're at it, and what the cities will do and what the taxpayers will actually pay for. So in sanctuary cities, that doesn't mean that federal government agencies like Homeland Security and DHS or the FBI are not interacting and doing things locally with police departments. In fact, quite the opposite. If you did a FOIA request, you'd find there are thousands of agreements signed with block grants, with DHS in particular, to do certain activities that help, particularly in enforcement of immigration and capture of bad people, if you will, and what will happen there, and then what the policing is for local policing standards, etc. Um, Overall, we have dozens of agreements in California that I'm aware of where we're designated a sanctuary city as having passed local ordinance by the local authorities to limit what our sheriff's departments or our police officers may do in cities and towns across the state, but they're still interacting and still doing work with immigration enforcement, the Border Patrol, all the time.
Cool. Well, thank you for that, Flora and Paula. And whoever wants to go next, Jordan, Jordan, sorry, Melody, any agreement or rebuttal?
I mean, I guess I can kind of rebut to some degree. You know, when I think about sanctuary cities, it's basically a system that is designed to enable, in effect, it enables people to be in these cities illegally. They should not be here. I understand that it's like, hey, you know what? There's all this crime and there's all this other stuff. It's like, but none of these people should be here. So I don't understand what the point is in enabling these types of people to flood into these cities, which only ends up creating more problems because you don't know who these people are and you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know where they are. And they just kind of are existing in this place. And who knows? They're causing chaos. They're paying taxes. Maybe they're not paying taxes. They're doing jobs under the table where other people can be doing those jobs. I don't really see any actual benefit beyond like like a sympathetic, hey, you know what? I understand that there are people who are out there in the world and they're having a hard time and you know they want to come to the land of opportunity. It's like, but when we create these situations where it's like, here's the land of opportunity, what we end up doing is we just we in effect invite a whole bunch of people into this place who end up absorbing a lot of our resources. And so when you have all these people, and especially when you say, hey, you know what, there's crimes that are happening. Well, that's our resources going towards dealing with crimes that involve people that shouldn't be involved. There's healthcare types of things where people who are just provided sanctuary, they're able to gain welfare type stuff, and that's just sapping money from our system, and that's our money. That should be going towards services for us. So I don't really understand why it would even be considered a good thing to have sanctuary cities where we're just protecting people who we know for a fact are not supposed to be here. So that's what I got.
All right, Melody, what do you have to add?
I understand the separation of federal versus state, city, county. I understand that, and I agree with that. I believe that's why we're the 50 states of the United States, is so that we can be autonomous in how we want to govern ourselves. But for me,
There he is.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we good to go, everybody?
I am.
Yeah. So this wasn't part of the plan, so but just to recap, we were talking about sanctuary cities, and Flora made a point that you know, sanctuary policies create trust with law enforcement, which was important. Paula talked about the separation of powers aspect, and then Jordan talked about resources and also the legality issue of people being here that shouldn't be here. And I'm not taking a position on these. These is just my recap. So if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. And Melody was about to share her. She had a great preamble going to it, where she was noting her areas of agreement before launching into her original thoughts.
Okay, so I am for the separation of the federal government from the states because, as I said, the states are autonomous, and and I want to keep it that way. I don't want it to be one big. Everybody has to follow every rule of the federal, at the federal level. You know what I mean? That
Right.
didn't come out right. See, this messed me all up. But anyways, but my point being is that we did not really hear anything about ICE until Trump took office. And this whole sanctuary cities has been around, I just looked it up, around 1980s. And nobody said anything about it. And then now that we're trying to actually enforce our immigration laws, now the country's in an uproar, and that upsets me because to me it seems like it's not really about following the law. It's about following the social political stance. And I agree with Jordan. We need immigration for all sorts of the same points he made. You know, people say, well, if they weren't doing the jobs wouldn't get done. Well, that is so not true. Go back to the Great Depression and find out what people were doing to put food on their table. You know, we have people living in the streets because they say there's no jobs and no housing, but yet if we were to limit how many immigrants came in and let ICE do their job, then I think we could solve some of those social problems. That's my take.
So, just logistically, in the interest of time, I'm thinking we'll go for another 10 minutes or so on this sanctuary cities topic, and then we'll move on to our next topic so we can end at the allotted time. And unless Jeremy tells me otherwise. So this is my suggestion, and I'll just wait for Jeremy to give me feedback on what he thinks we should do. But given all, and thank you for that, Melody. So everyone's articulated a pretty good position. So Flora, since you started us out, do you have a quick and I do emphasize I don't want to cut you off, but just to keep time going because we lost some valuable time because of Zoom shenanigans. What do you have to say to Melody and to Jordan?
So I'll touch on them pretty quickly. I'll just go over the bullet points. One of the big ones that was discussed from Jordan was the economic impact, the lack of tax contributions, labor employment, things of that nature. I will say that based on several studies from the National Bureau of Economic Research, there is actually an increase in economic stability. In sanctuary cities, there's an increase that we see in taxpayer amount coming in from immigrants. And I think that it would be disingenuous to ignore the fact that if you have the safety to pay taxes, you're more likely to pay them. Another big one is crime rate. Does that actually affect crime rate? Does it actually lower it, raise it? These dangerous criminals that it's protecting type of mentality that we see when we think about sanctuary cities. There are two major researches, one conducted by the Cato Institute. It was an analysis that found that there was no correlation between crime rates in sanctuary cities, wherein they would have higher crimes. And then the Center for American Progress actually had several studies that show that the crime rates were either similar across the board or lower in some cases. Overall, I think, touching back on Paula's discussion of the framework of it, it's not meant to prevent immigration from happening. In many cases, throughout that process, a crime is reported. Reporting is more likely to happen in sanctuary cities. A crime is reported, that person is detained, and if it's found that they're an illegal immigrant, they're more likely to be deported in that case. The actual dangerous criminals are more likely to get caught and removed if there's a safety in reporting them. I don't think anybody wants to harbor criminals. I think they just want to make it to where our federal officers are performing their jobs, specifically their duty versus our local police department. And then as far as the political outrage around ICE and things of that nature, there's actually been fewer deportations in our latest, within our latest regime. So I don't think it's necessarily the deportation. I think it is the frustration with taking over local enforcement resources and not having that separation between our local department and our federal department. So that way both departments can perform their jobs correctly.
What
Great.
resources are they taking away?
I'll give you an example here. Under the agreement, Stone Garden in San Diego County, the San Diego Sheriff's Department backed up ICE agents when they did a raid of a house that my neighbor lives in. And when they did that, the neighbor, who's a third generation American citizen who happens to be Mexican American, was detained along with their entire family, frankly, right after the fireworks in town had concluded. It was staged to raid their house at 9:21 p.m. on July 4th. They were all detained and carted off. 3 generations of family who had gathered together to watch the local fireworks show. Not very happy about that because it didn't seem very American of us.
Were
On the
those?
other, let me
Go
finish,
ahead.
Jordan, because the point of this was that the tip that had been applied for this to the tip hotline said that these people were harboring people who were here undocumented and illegally from Mexico. And this is a town that has 47% of its population that is Hispanic American. We are 30 miles from the Baja border. Anyways, the end result is they went through this whole process. They did this. Nobody investigated on the part of ICE that the tip had any veracity to begin with. The sheriff's department lent itself to this. And then at the end of the day, because this did not result in an outcome that everybody was thrilled about, the sheriff's department had to issue a statement that they would not participate and do this. To Flora's point, what this did was counterproductive to maintaining public order and security and peace in our neighborhoods. Because you were not going to call the sheriff's department who had actively participated in this if there really was a crime that you needed to report or you had seen something. Meanwhile, after 5 days, the family was released after they had shown all of their identification. The issue ended up in the Board of Supervisors. San Diego County has dominion over the sheriff's department. And at the end of the day, the federal government failed to compensate and pay the county for the cost of the sheriffs who participated in that raid.
Why did they have to participate? Why did the local authorities have to participate in the raid?
There's an agreement between local police agencies here in the county. There are all over the country. There are agreements between police agencies
So they were just doing their job
and the federal
then.
government.
So they were doing their job and they received a bad tip. Is effectively what happened, right?
Yes.
Why would anybody compensate them for a bad tip? If anything, I would say who provided the bad tip, you can go after them. If anything.
That happens to
would
Americans
be-
all day long.
This is Department of Homeland Security.
Because it's their
not
job. That's their
Department
job is to find, locate people who are not supposed to be here and deport them. And what I see in a lot of situations,
But they
and this
didn't
may be a
do
different
that, Jordan.
this may be a different situation from what you're talking about, but oftentimes what I end up seeing is massive amounts of people who are just chasing after and going after ICE. They're following them. They're throwing things at them. They're approaching them on the streets. They're obstructing what they're trying to accomplish. And that to me is creating all kinds of problems, but that doesn't really seem to be much of a concern for a lot of people. It's just, hey, you know what? Like they act as if it's like, oh, we're fighting against the oppressors. To me, hey, you know what? If they had to, it does suck. It does suck that here's some Americans who had to go through this process, and there was some negative stuff that's going on about it. But I think a lot of that kind of stuff is like, it's kind of drummed up, and I don't know, it's the general situation with ICE and what they end up having to deal
Mhm.
with. It creates a lot of extra complications, and then when you and then when you have other people who are like, hey, I'm gonna what, snitch on my neighbors or something because they have some sort of a negative idea about what's going on. um I think that's some stuff that is a level of a problem, but I don't understand why it would be that the federal government or anybody would necessarily need to recompensate them for the actions that they were taking.
So
I
Along,
under agreements, it's very expensive to deploy police officers outside of what they normally do. So the county of San Diego ends up having to pay those officers who were participative in that exercise.
They're
And the
not
federal
there for every
government,
so
time though,
so
right?
sorry,
of
I do want to just
Miller.
share there's a
Mhm.
kind of an observation question from the audience about you know these cities. There have been questions raised about the reporting of their crime rates in sanctuary cities, as well as you know the sanctuary city governments playing a role in 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 some of the outrage against ICE and so on. So I just wanted to mention, I think we're kind of talking around that area, so I wanted to bring this up and
Hmm.
see what our debaters might
So
want to
like,
say about that.
yeah, so like when you have the narrative that is so anti-ICE that it causes these people to, like, citizens to come out and approach ICE, what that ends up doing is it requires local authorities, because the ICE agents are not necessarily supposed to be dealing with the general public. That's for the local authorities to deal with. So when you have this narrative that's like, oh, here's the Gestapo ICE that are running around doing all of this crazy stuff, really the ICE is just doing their job. They're following up on these tips. They're following up on these things. And so when you have this narrative that's like, oh my god, these guys are so bad, the ICE end up needing protection, which means that they have to bring in the local authorities. And so I don't know why we would have to. I'm not blaming ICE for ICE having to do their job and requiring local authorities in order to protect them effectively from the public.
I
So
think
we have and again along these lines, and I'll let you go in just a second, Flora. There's a counterpoint from another audience member, that his city stops local police from helping ICE because ICE is creating situations where the city has to come in and rescue them. Um, so I wanted to throw that into the mix,
Yeah, the
just as
city's
that's
creating the problems that requires the protection.
I
Or
think in the
I'm gonna say, Flora, so I can finish this, please. ICE is creating the problems. My
Hmm.
point to all this is that ICE needs to operate by policing standards and they need to follow the law. I'm not suggesting that people running after ICE is appropriate. I'm not suggesting other things. I'm simply saying it's not a one sided issue here. ICE needs to become more proficient at its policing standards than it has been recently, and the police have to be compensated along with the cities under the current things. Thank you, Flora. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and just I do want to move on to the next topic. So if I'm going to actually do this in reverse order that we started. So Melody, if you just kind of want to and you can pass
Yeah,
on
I
this
can
if you don't
start.
want to. If you have a quick you know, 20, 30-second
What are we doing?
summation. Yeah, before we move on. Well, before we move on to the next topic, which is going to be universal health care. If you have a quick sort of summation
Summation?
of, yeah.
I my
y- y-
summation is we want to talk about sanctuary cities and what's going on there. Well, why don't you look at all the other cities and towns that are not sanctuary cities and how they're dealing with ICE coming in? Because you're not having this rioting, you're not having these people stop them. And these cities that you ladies want to say, oh, we need these illegal immigrants because of our tax base and this, that. Look at the homeless problem in your cities, the school problems in your cities, the lack of housing in your cities. Closing.
All right. And Jordan, any last thoughts on this?
I had made a few notes. There was mention about how with the taxes and all of that stuff, and how immigrants are and illegals specifically, not immigrants, because that's a very different type of a person. Illegal people who are here, who are working under the table and all of this stuff, and like how they're providing tax. They're it's good that they're providing taxes. They're not really. That's like, here's an extra number of people that we are really, what a lot of those people are doing. Sure, maybe there's some taxes, but those people are also taking in money, and they're sending a lot of that money and that wealth out of the country. There's also crime rates. The crime rates are no different from how things are prior. Like sanctuary cities, we've got, there's what is it? I'm brain farting.
Let me
The
come.
crime rates from illegals are no different from regular people. Well, factually, like, those are crimes that are being committed that should not even be happening here at all. There's no reason for them to be happening whatsoever. So those technically are additional crimes. If you're comparing the two, we have our own problems, and we have our own issues to deal with. And if what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, here's here's other people's problems that are coming here, and they're just stacking on theirs on top of ours. I'm not for that. I don't think that that's a good idea. That's all I
All
got for
right.
this.
All right, Paula, your summation, and you can pass.
I think I'll pass on this and let
Yeah,
Flora
yeah.
have a
Flora,
point, since I
and
felt
again,
like cut her off.
you can pass too.
There you go.
But if you have a summation, go for it.
I think the difficulty, and there's not been a lot of time for back and forth for elaborations on any of this, is that
Yeah.
I think the general summation here is that nobody is disagreeing that deportation and managing the illegal immigration into our country is the issue. Nobody thinks that's the problem. Nobody is for civilians walking within this. It's okay. Nobody is for within our group, nobody is for civilians running out and attacking ICE officers or anything of that nature. We're not saying go and murder and obstruct justice and all of that nature. For me, the main idea is to remain within the framework of what a sanctuary city functions as. And it's just saying that your local officer, if you report a crime, is not going to deport you for being an illegal immigrant that reported a crime. That there has been cases of lower crime reporting in cities where immigration crackdown has happened. And as far as just the ideas of, oh goodness, what one of our comments that was wanting to talk about, I just think that if we focus on the idea of what a sanctuary city is supposed to represent, as far as it's not a safe haven for illegal immigrants. It just means if you report a crime to your local officer, that local officer will not deport you. But it does also mean that Federal immigration officers might. That is still something within the agreements within all of these sanctuary cities that is supposed to support each other. But resources are not supposed to be changed from one direction to another. There's a separation there that needs to be maintained.
All right. And unfortunately, we are out of time. And in the remaining 13 minutes, we're going to try and cover everything there is to possibly cover about universal health care, because that's always a quick topic. But thank you, everybody, for your great debates and thoughts on sanctuary cities. Anybody want to start on universal health care?
Well,
Go for it.
I believe that in a sense, and not the European model, but I believe we do have universal health care, because if you are poor in this country, you get free or reduced health care. We have made it where, like McDonald's and such used to not have to provide health care to their employees if they worked under us or any amount of hours, actually. And now if you work over, I think it's either 32 or 35 hours a week, if you have a certain number of employees, you have to offer health care. And so I believe in a way we do have health care. You can go into any ER and get medical treatment, no matter what your means of payment or non-payment are. And one last thing I'll say, in my opinion, is I don't believe healthcare is a right. I believe it's a privilege. Done.
If I can hop in, my kind of general position, I would love to have a universal healthcare where if I have a problem, I can go and I can get care effectively, whatever it is. I can get the care that I want, and I don't have to pay an arm and a leg. If you don't have the enough, like if you don't have very much money or you don't have very good insurance, the cost can just effectively make you want to say, you know what, you may as well just let me die and let my offspring just take whatever they can. It can be absolutely brutal. And so I'm very much in favor of creating a system for universal healthcare. But the problem that I see is that in order to have that, we have to have a massive amount of wealth, a massive amount of income that goes to the government, who is able to dole that out to the rest of the country. And what ends up happening is when we have these things like sanctuary cities, and we just have and what we do is we enable the people who are in these sanctuary cities to be on welfare. They're fed, they're housed, they're educated, they're provided everything. They're even provided for healthcare. These are people who should not be receiving any of these benefits. And how in the world are we ever able to reach a point where we can have universal healthcare if we're giving all of our money to all of these people who are not supposed to be here?
Well, thank you for that. And Jeremy has let me know that if it's okay with everybody in the group, or anybody in the group that wants to stay late and spend a little more time on these topics, if you have time, we're able to do that, given the technical difficulties we had earlier. So yeah, thank you for that. And so any further comments or rebuttals or agreement with the points made so far?
I think I'll speak a little bit about the humanistic point of view. So I do think medical care is a human right. I don't think it's a privilege. I think many things that we need as necessities in our lives should be a human right. We should all be able to access clean water and energy. We should all be able to access these things and participate in them. And I think we should be able to participate in healthcare. It makes our society, in fact, our civilization, more profoundly productive and helps us a great deal. I don't think we should marginalize people who make less or have less resources than people who have more resources from the adequacy of receiving emergency care. I honestly believe that anyone who needs emergency care should receive it. And I don't think we should put our medical professionals into a position where they deny care to anyone because they took a Hippocratic oath to say that they would provide care to everyone. So, that being said, I also know that in the last 30 years, medical care in specific has increased in cost per capita in the United States and is getting to a point for many people it's unsustainable. So we have to work on that. That's what I'm driving toward here. We do have to work on that. But what we had for medical care 30 years ago did not involve the level of technology or research or positive outcomes that come with these things that we do to sustain ourselves. I know there are a lot of particular issues about it, but overall, I think we should be driving toward a society that recognizes we live a very long time. We live 30 years longer than people did in the 1940s on average. So I'd like to see us work in that direction. And I'd like to see us work at helping make the cost of healthcare more affordable for everyone, whatever that program may be.
I think, real quick, I think that you kind of actually made the case that it's actually not a right and it is a privilege. If we can't just afford healthcare, that means that it's not just a right for people. We have to be able to create a system that enables people to be able to take part in the privilege of having healthcare. We can't just say, hey, you need to take care of me no matter what. That's it. And I get to get the drugs, I get to get the all of the care in the world. I get to absorb all of the cancer treatment stuff, all this. Like, it doesn't really, these are resources that we need. And so we have to create the system that allows us to be able to partake in that privilege, because we don't have that right. A right is something like, I have the freedom of speech. That's a right that we've granted ourselves. It's not, but it's also a privilege because there's many other countries that don't have those kinds of things. So we have to create that world. That's my point to this. That's my counter.
Flora, you haven't spoken on this topic yet, so, and then
Yes.
after that, we have a couple of audience questions.
I think it's really easy to consider the idea that a universal healthcare would be unsustainable or something that we could not afford. The US already pays more per capita for its healthcare than any of our peers that have enacted some form of universal healthcare. We're already paying more. We're already paying that amount, but we're not getting the same benefits from it. We're paying more to get less than a lot of our other peers. I do, functioning from a humanist standpoint, I do also believe that healthcare is a right. There are several journals that have been released that show a high number of families go bankrupt due to medical debt and medical costs. To touch on the idea that if you need medical help, you can just go get it, that is very much so not always the case. And somebody should not lose their entire livelihood if we want to be concerned about our homeless populations in these cities, if we want to be concerned about our veterans on the street versus not on the street, things of that nature. That's going to come from the fact that, is it possible to get health care? If you get sick, are you able to get better and resume going into the workforce again, resume contributing to our society? It's a little hard to do those things if you are physically unwell. It's hard to rear a family. It's hard to join the workforce, hard to contribute to society if you are sick. And a healthy society would promote a better long-term sustainable society and economy. And again, we already pay those higher amounts. We already pay more than other countries for our healthcare. We're just structured incorrectly for that healthcare.
I'm gonna throw in a couple of audience questions that have bearing that actually come directly from some of the points made. So one question is, we talked about rights, whether healthcare is a right or not, and there was a question about how do we define a right, and I don't know if anybody wants to try and tackle that.
A right. Oh, go ahead if you want to take the right.
I think it's an acceptance that in order to survive, we have necessities, and that we've all joined together in a society to afford ourselves rights, and this needs to be one of them. I respect people who think it's a privilege, but it's only a privilege then because somebody has more wealth and resources than someone else. And I don't see that as being a privileged space, if you will. So I'm going with, I agree with Flora's assessment that we do pay more. We do pay more. We also lead the world in medical research and cures and solutions, and we pay for that, and that increases our costs. I think that we have to come to some reasonable expectation that what makes us survive is a right, not a privilege.
So I would say that rights are something that are effectively like granted to us. It's granted to us. But when we're looking at healthcare, as you talk about all of this, it's like this is what we should have. But what we should have is just like we should have access to these things. And when you even make the point of like, hey, you know what? We pay so much. We are the leading people. We are the leading country of developing all of this stuff. The reality is we should be able to have our health care really provided to us because of how much that we provide to all of the rest of the world. But that is a privilege that we should be entitled to. But the fact of the matter is we can't even afford it. And when you start looking at like all of the fraud that's been happening, you can look at what's happening in Minnesota. You can look at what's happening in California with the hospice now. And there's so much more that we don't even know about yet. That's all money. That's all wealth that easily could be going into providing us the privilege of having our universal health care. So we need to be able to address that kind of stuff so that we can partake in the privileges that we have offered ourselves through the developments of all of this stuff that we've been developing.
Again, it's to me a privilege, not a right. And one of the reasons I come from this in a personal state, because I went for many years with no health care. I was in my 20s, early 30s. And then I developed a problem with my thyroid, got to the point where I could barely walk. I went to work every day. My job did not offer health care. And it came to the point where, okay, I went to the doctor and paid my bill and had the test done and paid the bill. And I made that a priority over, say, buying a new outfit or, whatever. That was my priority. And I think that another thing I'll say is I believe that there are three classes of people that should be afforded health care: children, seniors, and vets, across the board, because seniors cannot make a better living. Most of them are, on a fixed income. They should have. I think Medicare is ridiculous, needs to be overhauled, but that's another subject. Children, of course, have no way to make more money or get into a plan on their own. They should have it. Vets served our country. They should be covered, and they are. Vets are covered. So we can't say vets don't have health care. It may not be the greatest, but they do have it. But I still believe it is a privilege. And when you say rights, we have the right to move freely from one country to another, from one state to another. We have the right to rent a house or buy a house. We have the right to work at this job or that job. We have the right to go to college or not go to college. But I don't have the privilege of saying, you must move me from this state to that state. You must pay for my college. You must provide these things that are my rights. So that's where I'll end on that.
Before we go on, just a couple of audience questions that are related to this. So I'm gonna throw them out there. But first,
Real quick, you gotta. I feel like you should let the flow go a little bit. Flora was just about to go. When there's a break or something like that, that's when audience questions should really come in. Just that's my 2 cents.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll let that go. All right, go for it, Flora. Sorry.
Okay, I feel like as somebody currently in my late 20s, about to push that 30 mark, I recently experienced the same thing. I did not pay for insurance through my job. I work for the location that I'm in. I make well above the average median. I can pay all of my bills, put back a mediocre emergency fund and savings. That 3 month to pay your bill suggestion. I will say I was diagnosed with a brain tumor on my pituitary gland, and I also have a heart condition that makes it to where it is very difficult, if not impossible sometimes, to function and move and exist in the world. Working more was not there wasn't any, cut back, cancel the Netflix subscription, don't buy an outfit. I don't do anything like that. I have internet because I use it for my job. I have electricity because I need it to run my internet, and I pay my housing bills because I need to be housed. But when you go to the doctor and you hear that the price tag is, I think without insurance, it was going to be $7,000 just for the first preliminary test on my heart to figure out exactly what they needed to do. With insurance, that lowered it to a whopping $5,000 when I panicked and chose to go through my company's insurance policy. Again, I make enough. I'm considered middle class. I do not make low enough to qualify for any social aid as well. So I am kind of stuck in a point where I live with debilitating headaches. My tumor's not cancerous. I'm very lucky in that regards. But it's something that I would like to be able to have removed someday. That's also a surgery that insurance can elect not to go forward for because it's not cancerous. The surgery to remove my brain tumor is a whopping, I think the last quote that I got was above the $100,000 range. And I think even if I was making a 6-figure salary each month, again, I live in a I think the lowest or second lowest cost of living state in the country. That is never an amount that I will have in my bank account. And that is an amount that my insurance will never cover enough to where I can choose to have that, what they consider an elective surgery that does impact my daily life. And that, in regards to that, is where I think nobody's asking, like, say, or at least in my case, I'm not saying that should be something freely. The doctor should just hop on that and give it to me right away. But making that affordable should be something that's an option for everybody, because I'm certain I am a very average, maybe not average in the health issues and complications that I have had to face, but average in what I make, what I pay for, and what I have to do day by day. It's not frivolous spending. It's just the fact that not buying $2 coffees for a year is not going to pay for.
I will agree that it should be affordable. That's a whole nother subject. That to me is a whole nother topic, that are what you pay and And it's all because of the insurance companies, what we pay at the hospital. I mean, before insurance jumped on the bandwagon, we didn't have these $7,000 MRI bills. They were $2,000, let's say, but then when insurance comes in, now they've got to bill a certain way for insurance to pay. And it raises the cap. And that to me could be overhauled. I'm glad that some of the drug pricing is being fixed. There are places where we can lower costs and make it more affordable. I'll agree there.
I'm going to go a little differently, Melody, than that piece, because I work in a very large system. In insurance context, the more people that are in a system, the more the system will have, and the better the benefits that each person in the system will receive. That I can speak to categorically as a fact. I can back that up with lots of research in medical systems.
Then why is an aspirin $6 at the hospital? Why?
Because the nurse has to give it to you.
But the nurse is getting paid also.
The nurse has to give it to you. You're paying to a hospital for the overall cost of care. I'll go with this. An example, real quick example, because we do have questions and people have comments. If you're in a system and you are hospitalized, you might be hospitalized and it will cost on average $7,000 to $10,000 a day for a team of people, the infrastructure of the hospital, the technology of the hospital, and the insurance, both for the practitioners who are providing you medical care and the hospital, to maintain throughout a process of providing that care. And it's very expensive. It's not going to get around that one by trying to rework things a little bit. That is a cost. That is what you're going to absorb. But if you have, let's say, 270,000 people in your insurance exchange and they're all paying something, the incidence of care that Flora has or others, Melody, you have had, are not the entire population. The entire population in medical insurance is not going to utilize all of the dollars paid into the system. And I have often thought that that's where people get a little hung up because it's so expensive. You are buying insurance. You're buying it in case you break your arm, you have to be transported to a hospital and have the arm set. Or you have to go to a chiropractor afterwards, or you have to do a variety of things. In large systems, 7 large systems around the country that do academic medicine, the level of care, the level of service, and access to care is far better than many of the private exchanges and some of the private public insurance operations in the country. Whether you think this is fair or not, I think as a right, you had a right to adequate care. I think Florida has a right to adequate care, and I hope to do something about that someday. Same with Jordan or Lewis. And that's where if we're never going to fix a system from my perspective, if we're not willing to shift and change to do something that makes economic sense, that makes good sense, and that has a human factor that says, I'm willing to pay into Flora's medical care.
So as you were talking, I came up with a question of like, and I don't know what the answer is to this, is I wonder how many illegal people are actually paying for insurance. How many people who are not supposed to be in this country are signed up for insurance? Because if they're not signed up, then they're not paying into the system. They're not part of the pool that is enabling us to have reduced costs. And if what's happening, which I do know that is happening, is that these people who are illegal, who are not supposed to be here, they are just simply receiving health care. They don't have to pay a whole bunch of money, if anything at all. So are they not just sapping from our system and making it so that we have to pay these high amounts of prices?
I don't think they're a large enough percentage of people, and they're not inclined
If
to
you look
seek
at what
general
just
medical
happened,
care.
if you look at what
Yeah.
happened under Biden and how many
Mhm.
people flooded into this country and went to like places like New York and Chicago, those places those places are being completely decimated because they are absorbing all of the wealth that's
But
happening
they're
over
not
there.
here illegally.
They are here illegally.
No,
They
they're not
crossed,
here
yes,
illegally.
they are
They
here
didn't
illegally.
cross the border
They did
and do
cross the
something
border.
illegally and then get shipped
They
up
cro-
somewhere else.
they were not allowed. They are not supposed to be here. They crossed into the border. We can talk we can go through all of the little knickknacks of what oh, they're legally, well, they claimed asylum, and so then they were able to come in. It's even though their asylum claim is bogus, and they're allowed to come in and they can go anywhere they want, and so they choose to go to New York City, and then they land in New York City and they're provided housing, they're provided healthcare, they're provided education, food, they're provided everything. They are sapping our wealth from these systems. So how is it possible that we can expect that, oh, we're gonna reduce our healthcare when all of these people, you walk into a lot of these hospitals and it's people who are not United States citizens, and that's the point. That's really the point. Okay, you can say illegally, not illegally. This is about citizens, United States citizens who have entered into this country. They've followed the procedure. They have gained the rights to be able to take part in the services that we provide. All of these people who came in, whether you want to say that it's legally or not, they came in and they're not contributing to the system. They have not contributed to the system, and they're just absorbing our resources. And that's making it so that Flora ends up having to pay significantly more. And I don't think that that's a positive thing.
What would be, if you had to place a number on, what would be your number of lack of contributions? Because undocumented immigrants alone, as far as the last tax consistency goes, I believe for 2024 paid almost $100 billion in federal and state taxes. Of that, 38 billion or roundabout was paid to their local governments. Almost 60 billion of that was paid to federal governments. So I'm curious to see what we think and that's undocumented alone. That's not including legal immigrants that are here on work visas and things of that nature. That's our, big bad wolf, undocumented immigrants.
Yeah,
nearly $100 billion towards society.
I don't think that it's even remotely undeniable that millions of people entered this country from 2021 through 2025 effectively. Tens of millions of people entered this country, and many of those people were not productive. They have sapped services. They've flooded 2 sanctuary cities, and those are people who are not, they are absorbing resources, and they are not providing. If you want to talk about, here's somebody who's illegal and they started a business, and they got a food truck or whatever the situation is, and they're in effect kind of like they're productive. They're just kind of under the table productive. I think that those people are a lot less of a problem than the tens of millions of people who came in over the last 5 years. So I think we need to take into consideration whatever that number is, because I mean, you can just look at what's going on in New York City. They are having to do ridiculous things, and it's destroying the city. It's crazy. And you look at Chicago, it's destroying their city because they said, "Hey, you know what? We want to welcome in people. We are a sanctuary city, and we want to welcome in immigrants, as they call them, but they're not immigrants. They're illegal. They're coming here and they're not supposed to be here. They claim some sort of asylum, and it's like an economic asylum, if that, and that's not even a valid reason to come. Otherwise, we would just enable basically the entire world to come into our into our
Can I
country.
say something?
Yeah, we do need to start wrapping up this topic, and we want
Can
to
I
take some
say one
audience.
thing?
You absolutely can. We do need
And
to
then we'll
wrap
wrap
up this
up, yeah.
topic, so go for it, Melody.
I would like to say we didn't do birthright citizenship, but this all ties in.
We can do that
This all
next.
this all ties in. I'm not going to go into it, but with the sapping of the resources, because what these women were doing was crossing the border, having children so that their children, and by effect, they could access housing, healthcare, food stamps, school districts, busing, everything. Because once their child was a citizen, then they have to take care of that child and, in effect, get these resources that we are not getting for ourselves because we give to them. I'm done.
Thank you, and we do have some audience questions, and to your point earlier, Jade. Sorry, I
Joden.
Joden. Thank you. Yeah, I think it actually works out better to do this at the end. So yeah. So the first one had to do with why do we think our healthcare costs so much more, and than in other places, and related to that, why are other countries, so many other rich countries, more developed countries, however you want to call it, able to provide universal health care, but the United States is not doing it. So that's a lot, but anybody want to go for it?
Real quick, because I can answer it very simply. I already explained why it's a problem and why we can't do it. And the reason why other countries are able to do it is because they don't just they didn't. A lot of countries are doing it now, and they're gonna see how big of a problem it is. But they didn't just allow in people illegally to hop in on their welfare systems. And when you allow for that to happen, you just drain all of our resources. So that's why. That's why they can do it and we can't.
And Canada, if you talk to Canadians, which I've not
They have
talked to a
they
lot,
don't like
but
their
a
health care
few.
anymore.
Exactly, because I heard of
They
this,
used
and
to.
this is just one story, but a person had to have hip surgery. So they went and had the hip surgery done. Well, after hip surgery, and I've had it, you have to do PT. That's in order for it to work properly. It took them another, I think it was 3 to 4 months to be able to get in and do that. We don't do that to our people. We're more consistent on when you access our healthcare, when you can access it. We're more consistent on you need this doctor, this doctor, this doctor. Usually doesn't take, several different months to get in. That's what
It
I'll
just
say
costs you
on
an
that.
arm and a leg.
Well, yeah. But it does in other countries too. They're just paying it in taxes, not out of their checkbook.
And does anyone else have anything on that? There's one more healthcare question if we have time. Okay, so the last healthcare question is, what does the group think about standardizing prices across the country, regardless of what kind of insurance you're on, whether you have insurance or not, and so on? What's everybody's thoughts on that? This is a question that came up from the audience.
That's actually getting pretty close into the territory of one of the universal healthcare models that I prefer. Just from what I've looked into, it's touching closer to how Australia sets up their healthcare system. They're kind of multimodal. They have their universal healthcare that everybody has a right to. There is also a private payer model as well, and things of that nature. So that's pretty well what they've got set for what their healthcare pricing is. That is something that is working for Australia. Now they do have a smaller population than us. It is a little bit different over there. I guess down there, if you will. But that is one that I would prefer. But I don't think across the board, if that is the only thing done where we say everything is standardized, that will not positively affect where we're at right now. Taking one step out of it won't solve the overarching issue. But I think that it is something that can be slotted into maybe a larger reform of the framework. But it's not sustainable on its own with our current framework.
Yeah, I would just say real quick that you can't really standardize something like a lot of that kind of stuff because we have such different economies. If you're living in a metropolitan city, the demand is just so much higher that it's just gonna need to cost more as opposed to, you know, if you're off in the boonies. So that just doesn't work. A place like Australia or a place with smaller populations, that can work. But it's it's because, yeah, we have states, we have 50 states, and all of these things effectively act independently. So yeah, standardizing things, we can probably standardize things like drugs. If here's a pill, things like that, I think you can standardize. But again, if you really want to standardize the whole thing, that's where you want universal healthcare. And in order to get universal healthcare, you have to kill all of the fraud, and you have to wipe out the people who are non-citizens, who do not have who are not legally here, who are absorbing our wealth. You have to remove them from the situation.
All right. So we have about 7 minutes left if we're going to go till 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. We have a couple of choices. We can cap it off here if, you know, let everybody make whatever closing statement they want to make, or we can spend a few minutes talking about something that already came up, birthright citizenship. What does everybody think?
I'm down to keep going and cap it off with some birthright citizenship if other people are interested.
So anybody else want to talk about birthright?
Already did.
Yeah, there we go. That's why I said it. It came up earlier. Well, and we have at least two people that wanna that said one person said something, one person that wants to keep going. So why don't you go for it, Jordan, and tell us your thoughts on birthright?
Yeah, so I think that actually the birthright citizenship actually ties into the sanctuary cities as well as the universal healthcare. I think that what can happen? It's basically these are just different forms of abuse of of our system. And the way that I look at a lot of Americans, we have a huge heart and we really care for people and we want people who are struggling and having a hard time to have an opportunity to come here and to better their lives. But we can't, but what we need to understand is that we can't just open the door to everybody and allow it to just flood in. And what one of the abuses that's happening right now, and I've recently learned this, and it makes perfect sense, is there's like a surrogate or a birthright citizenship tourism kind of a thing where people will just travel to America and then they'll have a baby here and then they'll fly back, they'll go back, they'll get the baby's citizenship, then they'll fly back to their country, they'll raise their children in another country, in another culture, and that child will always have the ability to just come back to our country and take part in all of the benefits that our country has to offer. I don't think that that's a healthy way to run our country. It is opening up our hearts so much that people can just it cracks our ribs open and leaves our heart exposed to just being punched to death. And I think that currently what's happening in our country is that is being enabled. And I think that there needs to be a stop to it. We can't allow, I mean, we just saw something and there's that's just there's like a healthcare and money and all that kind of the services and stuff. But then you go and you look at like, hey, what's going on with I just saw there was a news story about Chinese, like a Chinese brother and sister who tried to bomb our military. Um, and like blow up our military, and they were here from birthright. They were born here, flew back, raised overseas, come back over here, and then they try to destroy us. And it's like we have to stop enabling certain kinds of things, certain kinds of behaviors. We have to close off these kinds of loopholes. I'm not very interested in having somebody be born here and then go and be raised in a different culture, and then only to just be able to come back here and maybe they're fine. Maybe they turn out to just be completely normal people. And that's fortunate that they don't try to blow us up or they're not taking advantage of us. That's great. But when you have somebody whose intention is to come here, have a baby, and then go back and then send their kid back here when they're an adult, that's an abuse of our system. And I don't think that that's appropriate for us to have to tolerate. I have a big heart. I'm willing to open and say, hey, look, if you fit our culture, if you fit how we want to live, and you want to live the American dream and you want to take part in the awesomeness of what America has to offer, I'm all for it. By all means, come on and do it. But you have to follow a process and don't abuse us in that process. And birthright citizenship, the way that it's being looked at now, the way it's being used, is an absolute abuse to our system, and I don't appreciate it.
So in your current views of what could negatively happen with that scenario, would you be open to, when that case happens, rather than, because I don't see, if somebody did come here illegally to have a child, I don't currently see a world with how our laws are set up where they would not have to then go back to their home country to raise their child, to keep that child safe. On the other dramatic side of birthright citizenship, would you be open to like a child rearing visa? Would that person be able to then raise their child that is now received birthright citizenship to our country within our culture? Would that not be a solution to that worry of our cultures not mixing or that assimilation not happening?
You might have to clarify that a little bit more. I'm not sure I quite understand.
So right now, the workflow that I'm gathering is that your concern is that people come to the country, they have a child here, and then they take that child to be raised in another culture separate from our own. And then that child then comes back as an adult.
That's one problem, yeah.
Right. For, dramatic side of that solution to that problem, say the mother was an illegal immigrant at the time. Currently, if they were to get deported, they would have no choice but to take their child back with them to raise them in their home country.
That's what should happen, yeah.
Okay, so you would then be opposed to the idea of a child rearing visa? In which
Yes.
Yeah, I see no reason why somebody should
That's
be able
foster
to come into the
caring.
country, have a baby, and then be granted the privilege of being able to remain and stay, and in effect, how is that not a massive abuse? It's like, hey, here's just anybody. I mean, over the last like 5 years, that would mean that all of these people who just came into our country, they can just illegally, who are not supposed to be here. They didn't go through any green card or visa process or anything like that. They claim to BS asylum, and they enter in and they say, hey, I'm dropping kids because I can drop 2 kids in 3 years, and that's when my asylum thing comes. And then it's like, hey, you know what? I already have 2 children who are here. Why don't you just let me stay here and raise these children? It's like, no, that's an abuse of our system. That's an abuse of my big heart. I want to allow people who follow our rules, who say, you know what? I love this country. I want to be a part of it. I'm going to go through the difficult steps because it should be difficult. We're the greatest country on the world, on the planet. And they should have to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to be in line. I'm going to respect the laws of our country, and I'm going to push forward, and I'm going to go through that process, and that's going to give me the right so that when I come, I can have babies, and they will become they will become citizens of the United States, and I will be more than accepting of those people. But if you're coming here and you're like, oh, I'm just coming and I'm dropping a kid, and then I'm going to say, oh, please, but I have a baby. I don't want to have to go back to where I was before. It's like this was a conscious decision of you to make that choice to abuse our system and to abuse my heart. For I would actually say probably 10 years ago, for the most part, I didn't really care too much about this kind of a thing. But after watching what happened under Biden and him just opening up the gates and just allowing so many people to come in here, I saw the levels of abuse and I was like, this is absolutely unacceptable. It will lead to the downfall and the destruction of our country. It's not something I'm willing to compromise with. I have a big heart. I want to let people in, but they have to do it legally. You can't just come and abuse you can't abuse us, our system, enter into our welfare, drop kids, and just be like, hey, you know what? Hey, it's a citizen now, and play this victim. I'm tired of this victimhood mindset that people are trying to insert themselves into, and then just saying, oh, please, but please, you guys made this decision, and you guys, and honestly, every single person I know for a fact, every single person who steps through that border, they enter into our country, and they're not doing it the legal way, they're not doing it through the proper processes. They know exactly what they're doing, they know exactly what they're risking, and they know that, hey, you know what, the time may come that the American heart says, you know what, you've been punching us so much, we're getting beaten, bruised, we're damn near death. We're not going to tolerate this anymore. All of you guys have to go, and that's what's ended up happening. Now we have hit the stage after what happened over through Biden's administration. It's not like, hey, you know what, like I was, hey, you know what, there's some illegals here with sanctuary cities. It's not really a big deal. We can kind of work through this. It's like, hey, you know what, we'll give these people a chance. No, now it's like you guys have abused us, and now everybody has to go. That's effectively where we're at now. And that's not because it's something that I want to do. It's something that is a necessity that is going to save our country. It saves our healthcare. It gives you universal healthcare. It helps us as a whole. We have to think about our people before we can take care of everybody else. Because if we just import and take in everybody else, everybody comes in here and they just bring this entire country down, and then nobody wins. Everybody loses, and I want to prevent our country from completely getting decimated, destroyed, and losing.
I'm empathetic, but I think that's opinion, and it doesn't match the statistics and the reported statistics from all kinds of people. Yes, from 22 to 24, levels surged significantly because the world had a worldwide disaster in COVID-19.
So we just say, hey, come on in.
Jordan, let me finish, please. Let me have my 2 minutes. I think that's fair. So basically, statistically, we're talking about 11 million immigrants who arrived. The majority of them arrived legally. So they're here, both legal, but there are unauthorized people, and that number is tapering down. Trump has done very good work at the border in trying to interdict people who are trying to sneak in the country. And I think the Biden administration did a fairly good job convincing the Mexican government to close their southern border, which definitely helped us overall. Those things are on record. But we had basically about 11 million immigrants arrive between 2020 and 2025. And they're not all here anymore because not all of them were allowed to stay. And near as I can tell, that's 3.5% of our population. Out of that number of 11 million people, we're talking 3.5 million people spread out in various places across the United States. Yes, they did concentrate in certain places because some governors sent people and made a big, huge public outcry about it. But overall, we're not dealing with immigration from the perspective that we're a nation of immigrants. We're dealing with it from this idea of privilege now, where somebody was born here and that gives them that privilege. And then somebody wasn't born here and that doesn't give them that privilege. And I think we need to take a really hard look at what they contribute, what they don't contribute, because all 11 immigrants who showed up between 2020 and 25 are not sitting on welfare. They're not eligible, most of them, for any kind of program of that sort. When we get to the point of them having children, well, they are going to have children because people do have children, and they are, by our laws, citizens of the United States. So it seems that we're projecting a great deal into this idea that we had hordes of people come, when really what we're talking about is less than 4% of the population overall. In answer to this, we need immigrants. What that number is right now, I don't know, but we definitely need immigrants. We have an economy that is predicated on increasing population, not on decreasing population. And we have had birth rates and other things drop far more than not in the last decade or two. And that's likely to continue because children cost more to have and to raise. It's not like you have a whole bunch of children like you have a whole bunch of cats anymore. Even cats are expensive, guys. But here we're looking at a circumstance where we have to fix our immigration laws. Don't completely disagree with everything at all, but I definitely disagree with birthright citizenship, that anyone who came here and was born here is not a citizen of this country. Flat out, that's what our laws are. That's what our Constitution says. And frankly, from my own perspective, I'm a little concerned about this new idea about immigration because my ancestors were decimated by the people who came to this country as immigrants. Completely decimated. There were countries here. There were 500 native administrative tribes across this country, and they have been decimated by immigration over the last few hundred years at the very least. I live within that framework of you're born here, you have the right to be here, it's constitutionally guaranteed to you. And if you want to block people from coming in, that's fine. If you want to create some kind of penalty for women who are pregnant, and come here to deliver, that's fine. You have to create laws, you have to create rules, and then you have to follow them. And that's
So
what I expect all of us to do as citizens of this country, because otherwise, I'm going to go back all these generations of people who settled into this country and begin to wonder, why did we do any of this? We're a nation of people from all over the world. They come
We,
to the country and they celebrate each other. They want to be here because they want to seek a better life. That's been proven by every poll that's ever been done and every study. They want to contribute to a space. They're willing to do work. They're willing to go to school. They want to educate their children. They want to have clean water. They want to have clean air. And from my perspective right now, we're in the crux of this. We have to come up with a better solution than what we're being afforded right now.
I think there's a
okay,
legal way of doing it, and I don't think it doesn't make any sense to me that we would just say, hey, if you just come into this country illegally and you drop a baby, that you just gain citizenship. To me, that's an abuse. There was one other thing that I always want to make sure that whenever I have the opportunity to talk about it, I do. You mentioned Native Americans. I just want to I want to inform people because I do think it is a very serious thing and is very much not known by a lot of people is that there is a massive number of women, Native American women, who are murdered, they're killed,
Yep.
or they just straight go missing. And that
Yep.
is happening in America and in Canada. And it's something that I think that it's just a simple thing that I just think that people need to just be a little bit more aware of, and maybe that little bit of attention will help them in some form or fashion. And also I actually kind of also want to mention that, when you talk about like the immigration, yes, when we have all these immigrants who are coming in, that is also hurting the Native American population. Because those people should be having more babies, but they're not. Their women are being murdered. They're missing. They're going missing. So there's a lot more that needs to be able to happen in our country, and we need to put more attention to a lot of different things. So I just wanted to make that point real quick.
Um,
I think-
Melody, sorry, I'm getting notes from a couple of people that from Flora and Paula that they have to leave soon. So go ahead, Melody, and then I'll give Flora and Paula a chance to get their final thoughts in.
Okay, this will be quick. I just think that birthright citizenship started as we were forming a nation and we needed citizens. We need to relook at this and who we decide gets birthright citizenship. I think that people in the military that have come over here, diplomats, I think those that we have asked into the country to work for us or to serve us should be granted birthright citizenship to their children. But just to come in as an illegal, unwanted, that is a whole different story. And we need to change the laws. Done.
All right. And Flora, any final thoughts before you abandon our effort to solve all of America's problems?
I think it's a little hard to speak on those, and it's a little hard for anybody to speak on them. The trouble with talking about undocumented immigrants and the birth rates of those undocumented immigrants is high because, of course, the channels that they follow to come through here don't give themselves to giving us accurate numbers, right? So that makes it a little bit hard. But I would rebut that the amount it is made to seem like it is a catastrophic amount of this situation that's happening that I don't think is that catastrophic. The numbers that we do have available to us do not concur to that. They don't agree with this being a catastrophic amount. And again, like what I spoke to earlier on the undocumented immigrant pay alone towards our taxes being nearly $100 billion, things like that. Those are numbers that we do have. And what I don't see to have an accurate rebuttal to is what the precise decimation of these alleged services that we're missing out on because of these immigrants, right? I don't see that is the actual defining factor of why things are going downhill, things of that nature. I have not been able to find any data to correlate with that, correlate or causate. There's been, and it's hard to track. I will admit that. I will defer to that towards anybody on the other side. That's really hard to track and know for sure where that's coming from. But to Paula's point, right now what our laws are is that if you're born on this soil, you're of the soil. I think we also get into some really wacky territory of what if father is a U.S. citizen, mother is not, father is not a U.S. citizen, mother is. There are a lot of nuances to that whole situation. And then it also kind of becomes a classist situation where if it's diplomats that we're inviting over here to work, they can have birthright citizenship. It creates, I believe, a stagnation of culture, stagnation of growth. Because as Paula also mentioned, we're not seeing those birth rates internally right now. We're not seeing that increase in population internally as we were before. And while I might be somebody that does not think that women need to have children for the sake of having children, I can also admit that a lower birth rate and decline in population can afford itself to a stagnation of improvement, culture, and development.
We are being asked to wrap it up. So, any final thoughts from anyone? Just or final statements on anything we've talked about from anyone?
Excuse me. I think we all know that we need to work on solutions. I recognize that we can get bogged down a little bit in various problems, but our focus, and one of the reasons we debate each other, is we need to look for solutions. We may disagree on the solutions, but we're all going in the same direction, which for me makes all of us more alike than not. And I appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
If
I-
only our government would work on
Uh.
solutions instead of fighting each other.
That's a whole other set of debate topics. but yeah, I do want to say I thought everyone did a great job in the debate. It was a really good exchange of ideas. Obviously, I you all came prepared with some things you'd thought about and had researched and looked at. So that was very gratifying for me as a moderator to moderate a good debate. So I appreciate that on a personal level. And yeah, thank you. And Jeremy, do you have anything to add before we knock off? All right. Thanks.